Greetings and salutations, Scribblers. I hope everyone's been taking care of themselves these past few weeks, whatever that may look like, and that you've all had a great time writing. So from the outside, right, writing really seems like a very solo activity, but it actually takes a village to write and prepare a manuscript for publication. Part of that team is your beta readers. So today we're going to talk about what beta reading is and give you some tips on how to be a good beta reader for your fellow writers. So first off, what is a beta reader? A beta is someone who's going to read your manuscript and offer you constructive feedback on what works and what doesn't. When you decide to have someone beta read is entirely up to you. For me, I like to bring in my first round of beta readers once I've done a thorough revision of my zero draft, and then after each consecutive thorough revision. But again, it's entirely up to you whenever you want to start getting that feedback. It's all part of your process, so you have to kind of figure that out on your own. Being a beta reader is an essential part of building your writing community. It allows you to exchange manuscripts with each other and offer feedback, which helps both of you grow as writers because you're going to notice things in their manuscripts that they do really well and things that you can help them grow in, and vice versa. But it's more than just reading a manuscript and sharing your thoughts. You really need to put yourself into the right frame of mind to beta read. So I have 7 tips for you today on how to be an effective beta reader. All right, so tip number 1, you're reading with a purpose. All right, so beta reading isn't pleasure reading. They're very different things. That's not to say that you can't have a good time reading a manuscript or that you might not just like fall into it because it's so wonderful and just get caught up reading it. But you always have to be reading with a purpose, looking for the structure of it, looking at the characters, looking at how the author put these words together. I recently had a beta read where I went in with the intention of leaving inline comments as needed and ended up leaving 0 comments because everything was so well done. And I only had a few overall comments to share with the author. It was an absolute pleasure to read it. I felt like I was reading something that was very finished and polished. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes you're going to be leaving a lot of comments. There's no one correct way. But either way, reading with a purpose means that you're extra aware of story structure, pacing, character development, objects, rules that are being introduced and then either being used and adhered to or not. So all of these things start to really become your focus as you do a beta read. You need to be thinking about why that element is or isn't working, and then share that with the author, which brings us to tip number 2. You need to explain yourself. So whether something works or doesn't work, you need to be able to explain why. This is a little bit less true with things that work, but is an absolute must with elements that you bump up against in a manuscript. You shouldn't just say, this doesn't work like this. You need to elaborate to something more along the lines of, I don't know, just Jim yelling like this seems out of character since so far we've only seen him cuddle puppies and help old people across the street. I feel like I don't have enough insight into Jim's thoughts to understand this sudden shift in behavior. So you're kind of saying the same thing both ways, but the second way is giving your reasoning for that. And it's a lot more constructive. And yes, it is more typing, but now the author that you're reading for has an understanding of what might not be coming across on the page, and then they can work on that. You've given them something very concrete. So please always try to make sure that you support your comments with what's going on in your brain to help that author see what's potentially missing. Okay. Tip number 3 is to be aware of your biases. This one's really important, and this goes for everything. What tropes do you like or dislike? What genres? What type of character archetypes do you love or hate? So I'm a lover of fantasy, and that's where I'm most comfortable beta reading. That's not to say that I can't beta or offer feedback on a mystery or a contemporary, but my notes are more likely to be focused on structural things than genre conventions because I just don't read enough of those genres to be as helpful. Similarly, I'm not a big fan of books that include like fae folk. So if a friend says they have a fae book and they want me to beta it, I either bow out and let them know that that's just not something I'm going to be a good fit for, or if they still want me to, because they want me to like really focus in on the structure and other elements, then they know going in there that I'm going to like struggle with different things because I have to work through my own biases about like a specific trope or character or things like that. So regardless of what you like or dislike, you need to remember to treat the book as a whole and to look at how that element functions in the narrative. Is it working or not? And then explain why. And remember, just because it's a trope or a genre that you don't like doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who do. So you've really got to be aware of that and be aware that there's no one right way to do things and there's no one great trope that everybody has to have or not have. So if it's working, then you explain why. And if it's not working, again, you explain why, just like we said in the past tip. Nothing is more frustrating for an author than getting notes where their beta reader has applied their own biases because it doesn't help them realize their vision of the book. And that's really your goal as the beta reader, is to help that author realize their vision, right? So it's really, I think it's great to beta read outside of your genre, outside of your age range, outside of all those different things, what you normally write, because you learn a lot. But it's also so important to realize that you need to give objective feedback to the author. You're not writing their book for them. You're helping them to figure out the best version of the book that fits their vision, not yours, theirs. It's their book. All right. Tip number 4. Sometimes you are not the reader this book needs. Okay. So occasionally you're going to run into books where you're just not the intended audience. It is not meant for you in any way, shape, or form. That's okay. Because again, there's books for everybody. And sometimes you're just not the right person. So when this happens, and you might not know until you're like 50, 100 pages in, you have 2 choices. Both of them involve communicating with the author. So the first thing you can do is to contact the author and let them know you just can't continue to beta read because you're not the right person. And it's just not going to work out. That's nice, straightforward communication. And hopefully you can say like, it's not your book. It's just, I'm not the right audience for this. This is not working out. Or you can continue to read and really focus in on the structural aspects while still noting in your feedback, again, communicating the emotional disconnect that you had in making with the characters, making sure to explain that has nothing to do with the writing. It's just you and your preferences. So either way, make sure you communicate that very clearly to the author because that's just how it is. Sometimes I have read many books, published books, beta reads. I'm like, this is just not the book for me. I am not the intended audience. This is not having any effect on me. And that's, like I said, there are so many things out there that you're not supposed to be the one who likes every single book every single time. All right, tip number 5. Communication. So we've talked about this a little bit, but this is going to be a little bit more specific. You need to have good, open communication between you and the author, and this is so important. The author is giving you a piece of their soul when they share a manuscript with you, right? And it's always a little frightening sometimes when we hand a manuscript over to somebody who we haven't worked with before. We're like, what are they going to do? Are they going to like it? Are they going to hate it? Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But we've all been there. So remember, keep that in mind. So you need to be respectful of that. This means being honest with them in your feedback, being objective. And the author shouldn't be hesitant to talk to you about your feedback or to ask questions. And likewise, you should feel comfortable with every comment you're leaving. If you're not sure, don't leave the comment. That's like the golden rule, right? So if you're like, I don't know if this is more of just a me thing, or I just don't feel like I can really explain what I'm saying here, then maybe just leave that off because it's not something that you should share. Again, if you have a really great relationship with the person you're beta reading for, you might be able to bring that up and be like, I'm not sure why this isn't working for me, but I don't like this part, and here's what it is. And again, that's even open. You can just say, I'm not sure what the element is, but this isn't working for me. And then that still lets them know, okay, maybe there's something here that's a little bit off. Or maybe it is just that person and that reader and their preferences. All right. Having those communications, I think, after you've given your beta feedback is also so important. This leads to really great brainstorming and problem solving for the author. I can't tell you how many conversations I have had with different beta readers at points, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you just solved my problem. Like, I couldn't do this And that outside objective feedback, because they're not attached to the manuscript the way the author is, all of a sudden you know what to do. So being there for them and being able to have those conversations, I think, is really great. Similarly, you need to be aware of any timeline that they gave you for getting feedback to them and communicate if you're not going to be able to meet that deadline. For me, I like to give my beta readers about a month. And as long as they tell me if they're going to need a little extra time or not. But after that month, that's kind of when I tend to cut off. I'm like, this is done. If I get feedback after this, that's great, but I'm working with what I have. So for me, those timelines are really important. I don't enjoy when I have a beta reader who takes 6 months to get something back to me. And that's okay. That could be their working style. But either way, you need to communicate that, and you need to have very clear expectations of what that author is looking for, and can you do it in that time frame. Things happen. You're allowed to communicate again, contact them and say, look, this just came up. All these things are happening. I'm not going to be able to get you your feedback on time. And then you can work it out from there with how you want to proceed. Okay. All right. I have to start using two hands because there's tip number 6. All right. Only give what an author asks for. So what I mean by this is that hopefully the author has given you some direction for what they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for lots of feedback on character arcs and world building, but they say to ignore any grammar issues. Don't go into their manuscript and start commenting on grammar conventions. If the author says feel free to comment on anything, nothing is off the table. Then you'll need to make some inferences about what the author is maybe looking for and decide where you want to focus your feedback. So this also goes for an author's feedback style. If they say that they prefer gentle feedback, make sure it's gentle. Your goal is to always help that author to fully realize their vision for the manuscript. So keep that in mind with every comment or suggestion that you leave. You want to be able to give them something that's going to be helpful. So only give them what they ask for. If they don't want to know about character arcs because that's not what their focus is, don't talk to them about character arcs. Stay focused on if they're I just want to know about world building issues. Can you tell me what questions you still have about this world? Just give them feedback on that. It can be difficult because you're oh wait, I'm seeing some other things and maybe this. And again, depending on your communication and the relationship that you have with that beta, you might be able to go into some of those other topics. But for the general most part, you just want to focus on what they're actually looking for. Okay. Our last tip, tip number 7, is you can only do so much. There are going to be times that you might beta read a manuscript in its very early stages and the author feels it's further along than it is. There might be so many elements that need attention, you don't know where to begin. In these cases, I suggest sticking to just 3 main structural pieces, all right? So this could be plot, pacing, world building, characters, etc. But just really focus in on 3 of them. That's it. Offer the help that you can. Each author's journey is different, and bring all the pieces together to that are needed for a coherent manuscript takes time to learn. So when an author is sometimes in their first or second manuscript and they're kind of early in those stages, be mindful of being helpful and guiding them towards their final vision. And just focus in on what you think, these are the 3 main pieces. If they fix these, then they can start looking at some other things, right? Because it's what they're ready for. And they're not ready for these notes that cover absolutely everything. That's going to be overwhelming and discouraging. So you want to make sure that it keeps that encouragement, that wanting to do more revisions and to change the manuscript and make it better. You don't ever want to overwhelm an author. So again, only do what you can. And sometimes you just have to really pare that down and almost do less. And that's going to be more helpful than telling that author every single thing that you think needs fixed or looked at in a manuscript. So in the end, the biggest takeaway that I hope you're having from these 7 tips is to put aside your own preferences and biases and focus on what the author is trying to create. They've asked you to assist them in building their perfect story, and your feedback is going to be invaluable. Being asked to beta read is an honor, and you should always thank people for the chance to read and celebrate their work. So make sure you do that. Enjoy the process. You're going to learn a lot, and they're going to learn from you. And then vice versa, when you have something beta read for you, you're going to want them to kind of follow these same guidelines, because it's going to be the most helpful for you when you get your manuscript and that feedback with it. So speaking of beta reads, the Scribblers Den does offer developmental edits and beta reads. It's on our website, so make sure you check out the link below to learn more about those services. In the meantime, please hit that like and subscribe button so that you get notifications for new videos. We'll see you next time, Scribblers. Happy writing!